Thank you, Batala, Washington. Please take your seats. Our program is about to begin. Please silence all cell phones and other electronic devices. Please take your seats. Our program is about to begin. Please be seated. Good evening. Welcome to the National Women's Law Center 45th Anniversary Gala. Please direct your attention to the video screens as our program begins.
They told us we couldn't vote or compete, that we were weak. They told us no. They told us we couldn't do the work, to act like ladies, know your place. They told us a lot of things, but we wouldn't take no for an answer.
Please welcome the board chair of the National Women's Law Center, Jane Sherburne.
Wow. Thank you so much, Batala, Washington. What a way to start. Yay. Good evening. This gala is always my favorite event of the year. As I look out at all of you in this great and troubled capital of our nation, tonight's event feels more vital than ever. And not just because we're celebrating 45 years of advances for women and girls, but also because we meet at a time when our work is so desperately needed. Bedrock values are under attack. Basic rights are under assault. And women, especially low-income women, women of color, immigrant women, and LGBTQ individuals are facing perilous risks to their health, their economic security, and their very place in our country. But those women have a champion, the National Women's Law Center. We advocate, we litigate, we educate, we agitate, we fight for women's equality and opportunity, and we win. We are on it. And what is the source of our energy and drive and our ability to succeed? The two Wonder Women we are so proud to honor tonight as they pass the torch to new leadership. There's Duffy Campbell. whose Duffy's thoughtful tenacity I first encountered in the 1970s. I was working for a member of Congress who wanted to reform Social Security to improve the treatment of women, especially women who had been married and whose own benefits from a lifetime of low or unpaid work were paltry. Duffy, with her passion for addressing the needs of economically vulnerable women, was a key ally. She and the center went on to secure Social Security reforms and countless other victories and advances for women since then. And Marsha Greenberger. I see some little people very excited here too. She once told me that a law firm turned her down for a job in 1970 because the firm thought Washington was too dangerous for women lawyers to be working into the night. But we all have learned the truth about Marsha. She is absolutely fearless. And for the last 45 years, she's been the driving force behind victory after victory, including her legendary Title IX work. And yes, it often meant working late into the night. To honor our co-founders' extraordinary legacy and carry their work forward, we are very excited to announce the creation of the Nancy Duff Campbell and Marsha D. Greenberger Legacy Fund. I will be telling you more about this later, but right now, check out the cards at your tables. Tonight, we are also excited to honor the center's new president and CEO, a woman who stands out among a new generation of national leaders as an inspirational advocate for women and girls. Fatima Goss-Graves has the vision and the savvy to take this great organization into the future. She is working every single day to tear down barriers to equality and to expand possibilities for women, all women. So tonight, we celebrate our founders, our accomplishments, and our exciting future. We have the credibility, the experience, the stellar staff, and the vision. We have wonderful supporters who continue to show great confidence in us. That's why, in this time of great challenge, I know we can do great things. And your generosity makes that possible. So I want to thank our dedicated dinner committee and its co-chairs, Dick Beattie, the Honorable Jane Hartley, and Stacia Kelly. And I want to thank tonight's sponsors, our corporate chair, General Electric, and our leadership circle, Davis Polk and Wardwell, JP Morgan Chase, Kirkland and Ellis, Latham and Watkins, Morgan Lewis and Bacchius, Paul Weiss, PepsiCo, and Weil Gotshal and Manges. And our groundbreakers, Arnold and Porter K. Scholler, Nina Beattie, Beach Street Foundation, Comcast NBC Universal, Covington and Burling, Cravath, Swain and Moore, DLA Piper, Fried Frank, Jamie Gorelick and Richard Waldhorn, Susan and Lawrence Hirsch, Hogan Lovells, Jones Day, the Coker family, all right, Deborah Slaner Larkin, Norton Rose Fulbright, Pfizer, Raytheon Company, SEIU, Sherman and Sterling, Simpson Thatcher and Bartlett, and my old firm, Wilmer Hale. It is great to have you all and as donors by our side. Each of you is so important to us. I am thrilled to report that with all of your help, tonight we have shattered all previous records, and this gala has raised over $1.6 million. What a tribute to our leaders and their legacy. And we can keep making history together if, when you go home, you go to our website, nwlc.org/takeaction, and click what you can do. There's plenty. We need you to be ambassadors. So tell your friends, tweet your thoughts, and post your selfies using hashtag NWLC Gala. And of course, I want to thank our fantastic Gala co-chairs, Governor Deval Patrick and Alex Dimitrieff. After dinner, we're going to hear from Governor Patrick, an unwavering ally of the center and a national leader whose voice is critical in these times. He believes, as he says, in the old-fashioned notion that each of us should do what we can to leave things better for those who come behind. Isn't that what tonight is all about? He's been a champion for women, and we're honored to have him here with us tonight as co-chair of our celebration. But now I'm excited to introduce you to Alex Dimitrieff, whose journey embodies the American dream. His family came here as emigres from Russia. His parents spoke no English. Alex went on to graduate from Yale and Harvard Law, serve as a White House Fellow, and earn a reputation as a star trial lawyer at Kirkland & Ellis, before becoming Senior Vice President and General Counsel at GE. Alex is passionate about tearing down the barriers that keep diverse voices from being heard and diverse talent from rising to leadership. He's been an incredible supporter of the center, and we're honored and proud to have him in our corner. Please welcome Alex Dimitrieff.
Thank you, Jane, and thank you from the bottom of my heart to the many friends, individuals, law firms, and organizations whose incredible generosity has made tonight's celebration possible. On behalf of the approximately 300,000 men and women of GE, I want to offer congratulations, admiration, and most of all, gratitude to the extraordinary team at the National Women's Law Center as you celebrate 45 years of advances for women. You've been at the vanguard in the struggle for justice, equality, and fairness. And you've inspired countless individuals across the legal profession, reminding us all, through your skill and dedication, of the power of the law to lift lives. The progress you have helped drive has occurred in our line of work, too. I'm part of the first generation of trial lawyers who aren't surprised to see women judges, or women who are as opposing counsel in the courtroom. But we all know that there's still a long way to go at law firms and companies and on the courts. For more than a decade, women have made up roughly half of law students nationwide. They are hired as associates at roughly the same rate as men, and yet, according to a recent survey, women still represent just 19% of equity partners, a number that has barely grown in the last 10 years. Women of color make up less than 3%. Likewise, women serve as general counsel in only about 1 of 4 Fortune 500 firms, and they hold only 27% of federal and state judgeships. That's why I love Justice Ruth Bader Ginsburg's quote. When people ask how many women will be enough women on the Supreme Court, her answer is, when there are 9. But the impact of inequality may be even more acute when we think about access to justice. About 80% of the civil legal needs of those living in poverty go unmet, according to one study, a reality that disproportionately hurts women, and especially women of color. And when women lack equal access to the courts, it reinforces a cycle of systemic disadvantage. We cannot expect to move forward as a society if so many of our own people are held back. The only way for us to change it is if we work together with people of every gender, race, ethnicity, and sexual orientation being willing to step up for one another. It is past time for all of us to own up to the reality that women's issues are everybody's issues. It's time for us to own up to the reality that gender equality demands equal commitment from men as well as women. Now, Jane kindly shared in her introduction to me that my parents came here from Russia speaking no English, and it's true. But my mother and father were far from uneducated. English was their fifth language. I saw that they were nevertheless discounted as they struggled to express themselves in their new homeland. And that experience profoundly shaped how I think about diversity, opportunity, and inclusion. We all have a responsibility to stand up and speak out for equality and non-discrimination. We all have a duty to defend the idea that justice is a right and not a privilege. And we all have the power to help free our nation of prejudice and unfairness if we lead by example, both personally and professionally, as Marcia, Duffy, Fatima, and their colleagues have done and continue to do every single day. I know tonight will inspire us all to do exactly that. So thank you to the National Women's Law Center, and here's to the next 45 years.
Thank you, Alex. We are so grateful for your support. There's an old expression, where there is no vision, there is no hope. Well, here at the National Women's Law Center, we have a whole lot of hope. And that's thanks to the incredible vision of our new leader. Please help me welcome our new president and visionary leader, Fatima Goss-Graves.
What a thrill it is to be here as the Center's new leader and to introduce our next speaker. Earlier this year, as the Senate debated the nomination of Jeff Sessions for Attorney General, our guest tonight stood up to make her objections known. But as she began reading a letter from civil rights icon Coretta Scott King, she was silenced by Senate Majority Leader Mitch McConnell. He accused her of violating a little-known rule and said she'd been warned. You know what comes next. Say it with me. Nevertheless, she persisted. In a year when so many women felt silenced and dismissed, discounted, that reprimand and her actual persistence were the ultimate badge of honor. It became a battle cry for women everywhere. She grew up, in her words, on the ragged edge of middle class in Oklahoma. She started law school at Rutgers with a 2-year-old and graduated just before having her second child. She practiced law from her living room before going on to train thousands of future lawyers at Harvard. There, she cemented her reputation as an expert in bankruptcy and commercial law. But she wasn't done. In fact, looking back, she was just getting started. The middle class needed a champion, and she was ready to answer that call. In the darkest days of the Great Recession, she chaired the Troubled Asset Relief Program. She spent years fighting to create the Consumer Financial Protection Bureau, which has helped millions of Americans. Now, Now, as the senior senator from Massachusetts, she's been a tireless defender for everyone trying to get by. She's fought for reproductive justice because it is a right, because it is a matter of dignity and a matter of economic security. She's partnered with us to introduce the Schedules That Work Act, which will make it easier for workers, especially parents, to meet their responsibilities outside of work. She's been a champion in our shared fight to raise the minimum wage and so much more. No matter how much she accomplishes, she never stops fighting or forgets who she's fighting for. We are a better country because she persists. It is my deep honor to introduce Senator Elizabeth Warren.
Thank you. It is so good to be here tonight, and thank you, Fatima. You know, the National Women's Law Center Gala is always a very special chance to come together to highlight the important work that the NWLC does in strengthening opportunities for girls and women in America. But tonight's dinner is particularly meaningful because it's also a chance to celebrate the work of Nancy Duff Campbell and Marcia Greenberger. Marcia and Duffy are fierce advocates for women and girls, and they have done a remarkable job shaping this organization into a powerful force for good. They have been on the front lines of many important fights. The Lilly Ledbetter Fair Pay Act, yes. The Pregnancy Discrimination Act, yes. Strengthening Civil Rights Act, the tax and welfare benefits for single mothers, protections for students and service members from sex discrimination, both at school and at work. Their work has helped make real change. And tonight, we all have an opportunity to say a very big thank you to both of them. So thank you. Yep. I also wanted to be here tonight to welcome Fatima to her new role. She has been a strong advocate for women and girls at NWLC for over a decade, and now she's going to continue that important work as she steers this organization going forward. So I look forward to continuing our work together. We're going to rock on. So way to go, Fatima. And I got one more I got to say before I get totally wound up here. And I know, I care about this stuff. I want to acknowledge the co-chairs of tonight's event, Alex Dimitrov and Governor Deval Patrick. You know, it is yes, thank you guys. It's especially great to see Governor Patrick here. You know, he is my governor, or was, and always will be. You know, come on, I'm sorry. Once you fall in love with a governor, that's it, you know. You're just kind of a one-woman governor, you know. But Deval is a man who speaks from the heart and who fights for what he believes in. There is no better partner for working families anywhere in America. Thank you, Deval. Thank you. So, I am really glad to be here tonight with all of you because the issues that the National Women's Law Center focuses on are deeply personal to me. And Fatima told just a little bit of the story, but I really wanted to tell you why the work of the NWLC matters so much to me. I grew up in a family in Oklahoma, and we were one of those paycheck to paycheck families, the kind just barely hanging on to our place in the middle class. And when I was growing up, the path was very different for boys and for girls in America. Expectations were very different. Opportunities were very different. Back then, it was a world where most women stayed home, and little girls could do almost anything they wanted, so long as what they wanted to do was be mommies, nurses, or teachers, and nothing else. And I still remember, it was in second grade when Mrs. Lee told me that I could be a teacher. And God bless her, I said that's what I was going to do, and it changed my life. Now, all three of my older brothers, I have three much older brothers. I came along many years later. My mother always referred to me as the surprise. I was about 30 before it hit me what that meant. I thought surprises were good things. Yay! That's a whole different story. But all three of my older brothers went off to the military, and that was, they didn't graduate from college. That was their chance to build a future, their ticket to the middle class. But if I wanted to teach, I needed a college diploma, and it is a long and complicated story, including getting married at 19, dropping out of school. Man, was I smart at 19. But here's the key on that story. I grew up back when America was building more chances. Not just first chances, but second chances. And for me, that second chance was a commuter college that cost $50 a semester. I understood, yeah, that was that America. And I understood what it meant to get a second chance, and you better believe, once I got it, I hung on for dear life. And 2 years later, I graduated. I can still remember the first day of school as a special needs teacher. You know, the classroom's all shined up and ready to go. There were cheerful pictures that I'd hung on the wall. The children were all ready for a new adventure. I loved that job. I truly loved that job. But by the end of the school year, I was pretty obviously pregnant. And the principal did what I think a lot of principals did back then. He wished me good luck, and he didn't ask me back for the next year and hired someone else for the job. And I stayed home, and I tried desperately to be a good wife and mother, but I really wanted to do something more. So I came up with this plan to go back to school, and this time I found a law school that was nearby. Now, I cannot describe to you how crazy the idea was of my going to law school. My mother said many, many times, very loudly, that she thought I was jeopardizing my marriage. My brothers, all three of them, just thought I was plain nuts. And my then husband smiled indulgently, making it clear that he knew I could not possibly pull this off. But I bowed my head, I pushed on. You might say, nevertheless, I persisted. But I was determined. And so I took all the needed exams, I filled out the application, I budgeted and figured out how I could pay the $450 tuition. I worked out the commute in my trusty blue Volkswagen, and I had it all figured out, all of it, until I hit the one big boulder that nearly crushed me: childcare. My daughter Amelia was about to turn 2, and if I wanted to go to law school, I needed childcare. And I know it sounds like I wasn't very smart, but I hadn't really realized exactly how hard that was going to be. You know, I visited all kinds of places, I went everywhere, and I struck out everywhere. They cost a fortune, or they smelled funny, or the kids looked miserable. And this went on for weeks. And it's getting to be the end of the summer, and I'm starting to sweat. We were bearing down on the start of school, and I knew that if I couldn't get childcare worked out, my idea of going back to school was over before it started. And finally, less than 1 week before classes were starting, I found a place that seemed nice. Cheerful teachers, a good playground, smelled good. That thing matters, you know? There was only one problem. They only took children who were dependably potty trained. Man, I filled out that application. I said, sure, dependably potty trained. Got it. We are so on this. And I left there knowing I had 5 days to turn my not quite 2-year-old into a ready-to-go, dependably potty-trained partner. And I just want to say that I am here today courtesy of 3 bags of M&Ms and a cooperative 2-year-old who loved chocolate. That's my story. And, you know, I gotta say, going to law school and trying to raise a toddler, it wasn't always easy. But actually, it was a really special time. Amelia and I, we were buddies. You know, we both had backpacks, and she allowed me to believe that a life that combined the inside and the outside, family and not family, could actually work. Now, we made it through 3 years of law school, and by the time I graduated from law school, I was hugely pregnant with baby number 2. And by now, I was actually starting to think about career choices after law school, but law firms at this point were barely crossing the line to hire women. And hugely pregnant women were not on the recruitment list. Everyone smiled, no one said a word, and no one invited me back for a second interview. So, baby was born, I stayed home. Eventually, I got a job teaching at a law school. And when I got that job, I was beyond excited. I was back in the classroom. This time, the kids were taller. I didn't decorate the classroom with pictures of animals, but I still loved it. I loved every single minute of it. But what was going on in my life outside the classroom was not going so well. I had been teaching for just a few weeks when the babysitter quit. And from then on, I was just on the treadmill. We cycled through one child care arrangement after another, and every transition sent me into a near panic. Every time, it represented a failure. And one night, after I'd put both the kids to bed, my 78-year-old Aunt B called, long distance from Oklahoma, to just see how I was doing. And I said, sure, I'm fine. I'm doing okay, I'm fine. And in the middle of a sentence, I just started to cry. And once I started, I could not stop. I was failing. I was failing my kids, I was failing my family, I was failing my teaching. I was doing laundry at 11 o'clock at night and class preps after midnight. And I felt like I was always behind. And then I said something that shocked me when I said it. I told Aunt B I was gonna quit my job, my beloved teaching job. It's like it just fell out of my mouth. Aunt B's waiting on the other end, long distance. She waits for me to quit crying, waits for me to blow my nose, get a drink of water, and then she very matter-of-factly said, I can't get there tomorrow, but I can come on Thursday. And she arrived with 7 suitcases and a Pekingese named Buddy and stayed for 16 years. I'm a United States Senator today, in part because my Aunt B rescued me on that Thursday in 1979. Without child care, I was a goner. And I know how lucky I was because so many working moms don't have an Aunt Bee with a dog named Buddy who can fly in and help out. Now, lots of things have changed since the days when I headed off to school. And a lot of things have changed since I started out as an assistant professor in law. There are a lot more women attending college, a lot more women in the workforce, a lot more women in corner offices, a lot more women in operating rooms, a lot more opportunities, and we celebrate those opportunities. But we also know that there are still plenty of obstacles facing working women, especially women with young children. And the challenge of finding reliable, affordable child care is a huge boulder wedged firmly between women and a million opportunities out there. Yep. It is a big obstacle. Take a look at the basics. Tens of millions of families, ordinary, hardworking families, simply don't have enough money to make it to the end of the month. I'm not talking about enough money for fancy vacations or a new pair of sneakers. I'm talking about families don't have enough money for housing and food and transportation. They don't have enough money to cover health care and education. And on top of all that, they don't have enough money for the child care they need so they can go to work and try to make some more money. Now, over the past generation, from 1970 to 2015, wages have effectively remained flat, while the costs of all kinds of basic expenses have gone up. Housing costs have risen by 50%. Health insurance expenses have doubled. College degree costs more than tripled, and those are all huge increases. But the cost of child care, it has gone up nearly 1,000%. 1,000%. In nearly half of all states in America, child care costs are higher than the cost of an in-state public college tuition. That is a giant boulder that rolls across right in front of working women and families all across this country. And for single parents and for parents working near the bottom of the income scale, the cost of childcare often stretches families' paychecks past the breaking point. Think about the consequences of these skyrocketing childcare costs. Today, about 2/3 of mothers of small children have jobs. That's millions of mamas scrambling to make sure that someone is taking care of the baby while they head off to work. High child care costs limit career opportunities for those women, especially for single moms. They put economic pressures on families by making it tougher to save money for retirement or for a home. And they force families to make difficult compromises on the quality of the care that they can afford. You know, there is a lot of research showing that high-quality early education helps kids succeed in school and helps them do better in life. It can be a powerful tool to close the achievement gap, but skyrocketing costs often mean that families have to settle for lower quality care. And for some parents, that trade-off is really grim. Unlicensed care, a home where several children are parked in front of a television set all day, a relative who really isn't up to the task of keeping up with a 2-year-old. Families do the best they can under difficult circumstances. And even if a family can pay, care often isn't available. Try finding child care for a 6-month-old, or for a child with special needs, or a place that isn't 40 minutes from home, or a place that's open early enough that you can get to your job by 8 o'clock in the morning, or open late enough that if you get caught in traffic or an emergency comes up, you know your kid is somewhere safe. About half of all Americans today live in a child care desert. And this disproportionately affects families of color and low-income families who have the most to gain if mom can get a decent job. The fact is that even as expectations and opportunities for women in the workforce have shifted in so many ways for the better, child care in America remains an enormous roadblock. Compared to the rest of the developed world, the United States significantly underinvests in child care programs. Preschool enrollment in America is much lower, and the average teacher-to-child ratio much higher. It is time for America to step up on this. Last month, I joined with several of my Democratic colleagues in Congress to support the Child Care for Working Families Act. This has been led by Senator Patty Murray from Washington and Congressman Bobby Scott from Virginia. Now, this legislation would create a partnership between states and the federal government to ensure that no low-income or middle-class family pays too much of their income on child care, regardless of the number of children that they have. It is a step toward making child care and early education more affordable for working families who need it most. And I just want to shout out how much we appreciate the NWLC's support of this legislation. They're the one giving it momentum, and Congress should pass it now. Can we all just be clear on that? Go get them. And there's more we could do. You know me, I never come with just one ask. Consider scheduling. Think about this one for a minute. Half of all low-wage workers have little or no say over when they work. And an estimated 20 to 30% are in jobs where they can be called in to work extra hours at literally the last minute. Just think of how much of a challenge it is to plan for anything, like doctor's visits or going back to school or a second job, or yes, child care, without even knowing when you'll be working next week. So I've introduced the Schedules That Work Act in the Senate to put some basic fairness into scheduling. Congresswoman Rosa DeLauro, the best, has introduced the legislation in the House. You know, this is a bill that will help working families, and especially lower wage and minimum wage workers. And again, NWLC has been right there alongside me and alongside Rosa on this bill from the very beginning, and I am very grateful for that. We're going to get this done together, Fatima. We're going to do this. So that's two, but I got to have three. These are good steps, they are, but it's time to be bold. Think of it this way. America has agreed that every 5-year-old should have access to a neighborhood school that will provide a safe place and be there 5 days a week, and will teach that child to read and write and add numbers and take turns and not to hit their neighbors. We've got plenty of work to do to make sure that our public schools are providing real opportunities for all our children. But that's the basic goal. We've all agreed on the target. I believe that same kind of opportunity should be available to 4-year-olds and 3-year-olds and 2-year-olds and all our children and all their families. Yeah. It's a big goal. But no one builds a future without investment. Whether you and I have small children or not, we have an interest in the future of this country. And that means we have an interest and a responsibility to invest in America's children. And that means making sure that their teachers and their caregivers are adequately paid and adequately trained. We don't climb up on someone else's backs. And it means making sure that when parents are working, their children are safe and loved and learning and growing. So this is how I see it. Until we decide until all of us decide, men and women, married and single, black and white, old and young, that we are willing to invest more in all our children, then we cannot build a country in which women have equal opportunity to build a future. That's how I see it. So that's why I wanted to be here tonight. I wanted to be here tonight because I believe in change. And I believe that the energy to make these changes will come from people like you, people who fight for equality every day. And most importantly, the energy will come from many people all across this country who have joined this fight and made it part of their lives. The day after President Trump's inauguration, you all remember that day, right? No, I remember the day of the inauguration, but I remember the day after. And I went to Boston Common for the Women's March. Anybody in here go to the Women's March? So I gotta tell you, in Boston, we know how to do a Women's March. We had about 175,000 people who showed up at Boston Common. In fact, our march was so big for the space available that the marching part of it consisted of clearing a little space in front of a few people so we could march a few steps. And then finally we all just gave up and hugged each other, and that was the end. But I want to tell you what it was like. It was an amazing moment, because I look out and here's just this sea of people and women, many of them wearing pink pussy hats, right? And waving handmade signs. And one of my favorites is I saw a little girl who's riding on her daddy's shoulders. And she had this hand-lettered sign, and I know she made it. And the reason I know is because it had a lot of glitter on it. Glitter and rainbows and horsies. And right in the middle, as she's waving it up on her daddy's shoulders, her sign said, "I fight like a girl." And I thought, me too, sweetie. That's where our Army's coming from. And that's it. That is our Army. And that's how we'll fight for a level playing field for boys and girls, for men and women. And that's how we will win. So, to every one of you, thank you for being part of this fight. We're going to win. Thank you. Thank you. Thank you all. Thank you. Thank you.
Okay, here we go.
Marcia and Duffy, I'm so sorry I'm not there to celebrate you and honor your accomplishments in person, but you know that I'm giving you a standing O, and I've got a special guest here with me who wants to share her thanks with you too.
Hi, Marcia and Duffy, thank you, and a huge thank you. You have been tireless in advancing opportunities for women and girls. You've been by our side, fighting for our rights, no matter our color, background, religion, or sexual orientation. Your work helped women and girls progress in ways we could barely dream of, on and off the field. And I know the National Women's Law Center, under Fatima's leadership, will forge ahead and succeed in breaking down the barriers women and girls still face. When times get tough, you call on those who you trust to help. And Marcia and Duffy, I've been fortunate to always have your numbers. I invite all of you there to join Deborah and me in celebrating and honoring these incredible women. Cheers! Go for it. We love you. Boom, go.
So great to hear from Billie Jean and Deborah. Tonight, as we celebrate 45 years of progress for women, we are also looking to the future with an exciting initiative that I mentioned earlier, the Nancy Duff Campbell and Marcia D. Greenberger Legacy Fund. In honor of our fearless founders, this fund will nurture, strengthen, and empower leaders from across the country. And let me just say, there has been so much excitement and enthusiasm for the creation of this fund that a few donors have already stepped forward before the fund was even announced to pledge $500,000. I and the center could not be more thrilled. This fund will help us create a cadre of powerful and connected leaders and invest in their talents and skills to build a future, a better future for women and girls. Marcia and Duffy have worked tirelessly to ensure that the center stands up for women, and the issues they have championed touch us all. Let me try something a bit different to show you just how much. Raise your hand if you've ever felt like you were being paid unfairly because of discrimination. Had a partner who was paid unfairly. Raise your hand if you had trouble paying for childcare. Now keep your hands up. Raise your hand. Do you have enough hands? Raise your hand if you've ever been sexually harassed. Me too. Or know someone who has. Now raise your hand if you care about justice, equality, and fairness for all. All right. Every one of you with your hands up, you know how much is at stake. That's why we're counting on you. These fights don't happen without your support. We need you to call or write your lawmakers, to sign up for our action alerts, and we need you to donate. So tonight, if you care about Marcia and Duffy's pioneering work and preserving their legacy, I hope you will keep their legacy alive and ensure our strength for the battles ahead by giving to the Legacy Fund. You can pledge your support on the cards on your table or give right now by going to our website. We need all of you to step up. Thank you.
My daughter is almost 8 years old. There is a valve that opens and closes in the pulmonary artery to let blood go to the lungs and back. Hers was malformed. I have a child with a pre-existing condition.
That night, this boy offered to take me home. I was sexually assaulted, and that is traumatic enough. But unfortunately, it didn't end there.
I always put my kids first. Never want them to go through or see even 1% of what I've seen. Being a single parent is hard. I wanted to work. I'm college educated, but I can't even get to the interview because I didn't have no one to watch my kids. It's a struggle, but I'm still fighting.
Poverty is absolutely a gendered experience in our society. And there's no way to talk about equal rights for women without also talking about the economic conditions that women face.
Do I get these shoes for the kids or do I get this food? Do I pay the light bill or do I pay the gas bill? It's gonna be times that you don't know where the next meal's gonna come from. It really just took a lot of odd jobs. I've been homeless 2 times.
We're working really hard to try to educate people about those different issues, as well as to promote policies that undermine those inequalities.
Our phone lines are flooded with students reporting that they were harassed, that they experienced violence, and that their schools didn't support them. Anytime someone comes forward and makes a complaint to their school, that in and of itself is a really bold act that comes with a lot of risks.
Because I spoke up about the assault, because I reported it, I deserved to get jumped. I tried my best to just avoid all of them completely, but it became impossible. There are just too many of them. I was pushed in the hallway by one of these boys. So I went to the administration office. I sat there until somebody would listen to me, and the principal then said, you know, this has been a waste of everyone's time. So that day I went home early and decided never to go back.
The issue of gender-based violence in schools, it is a fundamental issue around access. It can have lifelong consequences. It changes whether and where they go to college, the type of jobs that they ultimately get. It's a moral issue, it's a civil rights issue, but it is a core economic issue for women and their families.
When Congress and the president said they wanted to repeal the Affordable Care Act and that was going to be the first legislative priority, it was devastating.
She's got scars all over her chest. Our worry has always been insurance, health insurance for her. So when I watched our government vote to take that away from her, I felt like it was an attack on my child.
Some of the provisions in the Affordable Care Act that make sure that insurance plans don't discriminate against women or don't treat children's health conditions as pre-existing. We helped to write some of that language that protect women and have really changed the landscape for women in this country. To think about a Congress and administration that would take all of this progress away, that's just not right, and we couldn't return to that. And it's really my role to bring her story to these policymakers and to say, here's what's at risk.
We look at a broad variety of strategies, whether it's tax policies that help people get needed support for paying for things like childcare. We are working to raise awareness of things like the wage gap, budget policies that make it so that if you are stuck in a low-wage job, there's making sure that people can still put food on the table, can keep their roof over their heads.
To think that this could potentially happen to somebody else is unbearable to me. If I don't speak up about it, then it won't ever get changed.
There's this law called Title IX that bans sex discrimination in education. That law's been around for 45 years. It's time for you to get with the program. We filed a complaint in federal court on behalf of Darby Ann, and we're representing her in that case.
We stayed up and we watched the Senate vote, and this is why we did what we did. This is why we wrote all those letters. Using our voice made a difference.
When parents are living in poverty, that means that their kids are more likely to live in poverty. If we can help a mom like Shantara, if we can help women, we help their entire families do better.
What I live for is a better life for them.
No matter what, like, you knock us down, we get back up and we dust our kids off and we keep showing up every day.
Now is not the time to sit back and say, well, that's someone else. Someone else can handle that and tackle that.
We use the law in all of its forms. Taking on individual clients, we pass new laws and policies. We aren't out here on our own. We are doing this work on our digital channels with organizers, with clients who are ready for real and meaningful change. That's what we're fighting for.
In the late 1950s, several years after Brown versus Board of Education, the NAACP came to my grandparents with a question that would take them all the way to the United States Supreme Court. Would they become the lead plaintiffs in a desegregation lawsuit against their local public school in Knoxville, Tennessee? My father, who is here tonight, along with my mother, was headed he was headed to the segregated black high school at the time. I think about my grandparents and what it must have taken to decide to stand up to racism, to stand up to hate. They'd seen Little Rock, the anger, the abuse, the acid thrown in 16-year-old Melba Patella's eyes. But they knew something else. The urgency of the moment was bigger than any fears. That the world couldn't change without people like my grandparents, like my father, like my family, who would fight for it. From a young age, I came to understand the power of the law through the stories of my family. I saw how the law could be used to silence, to abuse, but I also saw how it could be used to empower, to liberate, and lift up communities. That's why I became a lawyer, and it's why I fell in love with the National Women's Law Center. Being a part of this organization has allowed me to be the kind of legal advocate I always dreamed I would be. Every day, for more than 12 years, I have worked alongside some of the most dedicated, creative, and passionate justice warriors I know. From our lawyers to our organizers, our researchers, our fundraisers, our media specialists, and our administrative experts, every member of the National Women's Law Center team is here for one reason alone: to fight for women and girls. It is in their bones. And it began with our founding mothers. The great author Alice Walker once said, "The real revolution is always concerned with the least glamorous stuff." Marcia and Duffy, for 45 years, you have lived that sentiment to its fullest. You've understood that big change rarely happens all at once. It reflects the daily, determined effort to tackle even the smallest details. You have fought for women who get overlooked, whose voices are too often silenced, for low-income women, for moms who are scraping to feed their children, for girls who have had their humanity stripped away. Real revolution, it may not be glamorous, but the legacy you leave behind is beautiful. And I can't wait to see the revolutionary and beautiful future your legacy fund will help us build. And I couldn't be prouder or more excited to have accepted the baton this summer, because in these times, the work of the National Women's Law Center, it could not feel more urgent. We've seen an administration roll back protections that help women fight for equal pay. We've seen this president repeatedly target our trans sisters and brothers and punish them for daring to be themselves. We've seen our civil rights enforcement agencies diminished, a sham voter commission established, and massive cuts proposed to programs for our lowest income families. We've seen hate that had been shamed into hiding for years spill into our streets. We've seen the resurrection of racist and sexist myths and narrative tropes, and so many of us have felt afraid. But the urgency of this moment, it is bigger than any of our fears. And mark my words, we are bigger than the challenges we face right now. When the Trump administration put our families, our loved ones, our rights, our bodies at risk, the center launched the We the Resistance campaign. In the last 6 months, our supporters have taken 500,000 actions online. They have rallied in their communities, and they are urging their lawmakers to act. Through these and other organizing efforts, we are giving supporters of all ages the resources they need to fight back so that our movement is strong today, it's strong tomorrow, and it's strong for years to come. And just as we recognize the power of reaching younger generations, we know that our efforts must put the experiences of women of color, of the lowest income women, and LGBTQ individuals at the center of our work. We are committed to listening, lifting up their voices, and prioritizing our efforts on their behalf. And we have an answer to the civil rights agencies that are undermining our rights. Hundreds of private bar attorneys across the country are joining with us in our new legal network for gender equity. This is the first national legal network dedicated to combating sex discrimination. And with each heartless attack on our healthcare law, and we all know there have been many, we have mounted a vigorous defense. We mobilized an army to rally, to protest, and flood congressional switchboards. We resisted with all of our might. We've persisted, and we will win this fight. Now, we are doing everything we can to save birth control coverage for millions of women, including by suing the administration. And we are resisting Betsy DeVos's plans to roll back Title IX protections for sexual assault survivors in school. These attacks come just as women are joining a Me Too chorus to fight the harassment they have faced throughout their lives. So we're bringing our bullhorn and our legal expertise to ensure that the needs of survivors are front and center. We won't let hostility from this White House or opposition in Congress stop us from securing the right of all people to be free from discrimination and oppression. And we are winning new protections in the states. As this administration has attacked equal pay and overtime rules, we've helped pass laws that will promote equal pay in cities and states around the country. In Oregon and in New York City, we made work schedules fair so working parents can have access to child care. And in Vermont, Washington, Connecticut, we won new legislation that protects pregnant workers. We are rising to meet the challenges of a difficult time. But we also know these times, they will not last forever. In this moment, we are resisting. Yes. But in this moment, our mission is also to build, to lay the groundwork for a world where women have health care for all their needs, where employers don't discriminate against women in the name of religion, and where women don't have to choose between keeping their job, their pregnancy, or their dignity. A world where people can determine whether and when to have children. A world where all parents have access to childcare and all children have the opportunity to excel. A world where students, whatever their sex, race, gender identity, ability, or economic circumstance, can learn and grow and do great things in school without fear of discrimination or assault. A world where all women have equal pay and are free from harassment and violence. We envision a world that rejects the bigotry, misogyny, and inequality that diminish us all. And we know there will be times when our efforts fall short. But my friends, we will not falter. Because just as more than half a century ago, a racist school system in Knoxville, Tennessee was brought to heel by my grandparents and their children. And just as 45 years ago, 2 young women dreamed of using the law to lift up the lives of women and girls, and then made their dream a reality. Just as our heroes carried us forward on their shoulders, bringing hope and making history, we too are becoming the heroes we need in this moment for our movement. For 45 years, we have put hope above fear and marched forward despite the odds. And we'll keep marching, we'll keep litigating, we'll keep organizing, and we will never stop fighting. Because it isn't only the law that brings justice to life. It is all of us. Thank you. Now, I'd like to introduce our next guest. Deval Patrick has described his own life story as improbable. Raised by a single mother in the South Side of Chicago, he graduated from Harvard College and Harvard Law School, then worked as a civil rights lawyer, Assistant Attorney General for Civil Rights, and at the height of corporate America, all before winning election as the first African-American governor of Massachusetts. As Assistant Attorney General for Civil Rights, he was a powerful force. We worked with him when he fought to defend affirmative action, when he fought to protect the safety of providers, patients, and staff of reproductive health clinics and women's access to their services. And we worked with him when he led the fight to open jobs and public employment to women, including our nation's police and fire departments. As governor, he expanded protections for domestic workers, increased minimum wage, and worked to make sure that healthcare was affordable and accessible for all. Now, he is the managing director of Bain Capital Double Impact, which invests in companies so they can do well by doing good. In his role, he is helping bring jobs, opportunity, and hope to chronically underserved communities, and helping transform the improbable into the inevitable. He once wrote, "Idealism is vital. It sustains the human soul. The ability to imagine a better place, a better way of doing things, a better way of being in the world is far more than wishful thinking. It is the essential ingredient in human progress." Governor Patrick has spent his life imagining that better world and then working to make it a reality. He has been an amazing partner to the center, and we are so excited to have him here with us tonight and as our Gala co-chair. Please welcome Governor Deval Patrick.
Thank you so much, Fatima, and good evening, ladies and gentlemen. Good evening. It is a great honor and pleasure for me to join Alex Dmitriev as co-chair of tonight's very special evening. I want to thank Alex and his colleagues from GE, all of the members of the host committee, the generous sponsors and donors, the members of the board, and the organizers of this successful event. In recognition of the 45th anniversary milestone, as well as this historical moment, you, all of you, collectively, raised a record amount tonight for the work of the National Women's Law Center. Congratulations. I also want to congratulate Fatima Gross-Graves, the center's new president and CEO. Thank you for taking on this critical assignment and leading this incredible team at this critical time. And didn't my home senator bring it in tonight? You know, in a democracy, sometimes for the better and sometimes not, we get the government we deserve. For the better, we deserve the spirit, the heat, the strength, and the resolve of Elizabeth Warren for Massachusetts and for all of us in the United States Senate. I have been thinking a lot lately of how our democracy depends on unwritten rules. Rules about courtesy and restraint and respect and duty. In a world where bully-style leadership and intolerance are on the rise, in our own reality TV culture, where a lack of decorum is entertainment, one begins to appreciate that democratic institutions are fragile things. And that's good. It's good that so many of us are waking up to that ancient truth that democratic institutions and democracy itself are fragile things. We've been treating our democracy for a long time as if it could tolerate relentless abuse without breaking. And the good thing about right now is that a lot of us are realizing that that's got to stop. The transcendent aspirations of equality, opportunity, freedom, and fair play depend on a kind of civic faith. We first have to believe these values are in fact valuable. And then, as citizens, in the fullest sense of the term, we have to act. Democracy works when somebody has faith in our democratic values and then says to herself, now, what am I going to do about it? There's a story you may know about a slave woman named Elizabeth Freeman. Mumbet, she was called. Mumbet served a master in Western Massachusetts who was inflamed by the ideas of the Enlightenment. He would gather around his table other men of learning and influence and talk about the concepts of freedom and fundamental human dignity. Night after night, over their supper and their wine, they talked and became more and more caught up in the movement toward the American Revolution and in the later efforts to frame the Massachusetts Constitution, the forerunner of and the model for the United States Constitution many years later. And all the while, Mumbet was listening. When the Massachusetts Constitution was enacted, she asked herself, what about me? With all these declarations of transcendent human rights, she wondered what she could and should do about it. She is quoted as saying, anytime when I was a slave, if I had been offered 1 minute's freedom and told that at the end of that minute I would have to die, I would have taken it, just to stand 1 minute, a free woman on God's earth. Mumbet got herself a lawyer, one brave enough, one with enough faith in our civic values to test their truth in the Massachusetts courts. And in 1781, 82 years before the Emancipation Proclamation, she won her freedom and ended slavery in Massachusetts. And of course, for 45 years, that's what the National Women's Law Center has been all about. That's what Marcia Greenberger and Duffy Campbell have been all about. From defending the right for a woman to manage her own health decisions, to our work together to open the Virginia Military Institute and the Citadel to women, to the Affordable Care Act, and through many other victories and struggles we'll hear more about in a minute, they have kept faith with America's highest and best civic values, and then stood up in courtrooms and boardrooms and cabinet rooms and given those values life. Which brings me back to where I started. Democratic values and institutions are fragile things. They inspire us and encourage us, but they don't mean a thing unless somebody stands up for them and acts. That is the duty, ultimately, of every citizen. And that has been the life's work of two of America's exemplary citizens, Marcia Greenberger and Duffy Campbell. And so, on behalf of a nation of better off women and girls, and all of us who have kept our civic faith, let us thank them and congratulate Marcia and Duffy.
Marcia was an anomaly in 1972 when she began the Women's Rights Project. To go into a room of lawyers, she was the only skirt in the room. Sex discrimination was pervasive. It was deeply embedded in our laws.
There were jobs for women and jobs for men.
Women couldn't have their own bank accounts. Most universities and colleges were single sex.
To discuss the concept of women's equal rights was not really a matter for polite society.
Marcia and Duffy are result-oriented. They are committed like a laser. They are focused.
They were strategically brilliant.
They really invented what it means to be an advocate for women's legal rights.
A very special area that Marcia and Duffy focused on were women's economic rights and security. Most of the people living in poverty are mothers with children. And particularly, Duffy was one of the first people really to focus on this as a women's rights issue.
Whether it's equal pay or childcare or access to health care and birth control, these are core issues that the center has worked on for decades. And without Marcia and Duffy and the National Women's Law Center, so many of the rights that we have, we wouldn't.
Marcia and Duffy have established the right to be free of sexual harassment in the classroom, on the college campus, in the workplace.
The idea that all of us need to be included. You know, that we shouldn't all have to be 6 feet tall and our skin doesn't have to be white.
They used the whole panoply of lawyerly skills to work in Congress, work with policymakers in the White House, in a grassroots work. And of course, that's above and beyond litigation.
They've built this incredible legacy. They've opened the doors for women and girls across the country.
They have created the preeminent women's legal advocacy organization in the nation.
Everything the center has been fighting for of civil rights for women. It's rights of human dignity, of equality, of fundamental fairness.
They really led a revolution that changed the society in profound ways for women and girls.
Thank you, thank you, thank you so very, very much. Thank you to the extraordinary Devout Patrick for that incredible tribute, and to all who have worked so hard to put together this thrilling evening, which included the tough job of hiding some of it from Duffy and me. 45 years ago, a pioneering public interest law firm, the Center for Law and Social Policy, faced an uprising. The female administrative staff and law student interns presented the young male founders with a list of demands. They wanted to hire women lawyers, work on women's rights, receive better pay reflecting their skills, and no more serving coffee. Those guys listened and acted, with the occasional slippage on the coffee. By then, I'd seen my share of obstacles to overcome. Growing up in the 50s, one of only 10 women in my law school class, and the first woman associate at a Washington tax firm, Kaplan and Drysdale, at a time, yes, at a time when many firms wouldn't hire women at all. I was in the right place at the right time. The Center for Law and Social Policy hired me to develop the work on women's rights. My first assignment, to write a memo on whether there was enough work on women's rights to keep a lawyer busy full-time. 1972. Let's remember, it was an understandable question. Before 1972, there weren't many laws to work with, but momentum was growing. Ruth Bader Ginsburg had just started a women's rights project at the ACLU. And just the year before, she'd won the first Supreme Court case ever to strike down a statute for denying women equal protection of the law, ever. And Congress began in earnest to pass a series of laws banning sex discrimination, a stronger Title VII to better protect women at work, Title IX to protect women and girls at school, and more. Once word got out that we were open for business, requests for our help started pouring in. Everyone agreed there was no need to write that memo, and we were launched. We grew into the National Women's Law Center, and we never looked back. I'm in awe of those young women who understood the power of standing together. They, as well as the male lawyers who supported them and our women's rights work from the start, epitomize the women's movement and its values, values the center has championed ever since. And it's great to have some of those colleagues here tonight. Since then, the National Women's Law Center, working with our partners, has won historic victories. Securing child care for millions of families, although, as Elizabeth Warren so powerfully said, how much more to go on that front. The Lilly Ledbetter Fair Pay Act, making Title IX strong in the classroom and on the playing fields, to name a few. But we've also learned, unfortunately, repeatedly, that hard-won gains can never be taken for granted. We've had painful setbacks, the betrayal of Anita Hill, devastating cuts to programs that support those most in need, and relentless attacks on abortion rights. But every time the going gets tough, we get tougher. To me, nothing reflects that reality more than our 45 years of work on Title IX. In 1972, many thought the idea that young women could take shop classes or play sports was ridiculous, let alone that they could study engineering. We worked to make sure Title IX opened those doors, but we faced constant attacks. And in 1984, a 5-4 Supreme Court decision devastated the effectiveness of Title IX and other civil rights laws. We got to work again. A highlight of my life was walking the halls of Congress with Billie Jean King to right this wrong and watching her work her magic. After a 3-year, huge coalition effort, we passed the Civil Rights Restoration Act. So we're not daunted by this president, or Betsy DeVos, or any of the battles ahead. Yes, these are difficult times, but now is when we all step up and demonstrate our determination and our power. To paraphrase the nation's first Black Congresswoman and presidential candidate Shirley Chisholm, we don't measure America only by its achievement, but also by its potential. When I look at this room, I see this potential in each of you. I know that we will push back and push forward, that we will remember these days with pride. So let me close by saying thank you. Thank you to my husband, Michael, who has been my greatest source of support since we met in our first year of law school. All right, I'm going to say it, just a short 50 years ago. To my daughters, Sarah and Annie, my sons-in-law, Matt and Phil, and my 4 amazing grandkids who are all here tonight. Toby, Eden, Eliza, and Teddy. Thank you to my principled, dedicated, and ultimately utterly brilliant partner, Duffy. As co-president, you helped me become a stronger leader, and as my friend, you helped me become a stronger person. And to Fatima, what great joy, satisfaction, and confidence to know that you are at the helm with the awesome center staff and board. Thank you to the heroes who inspire me, like Billie Jean King and Anita Hill and Hillary Clinton. She shattered so many glass ceilings, including as, and it's amazing to say, the first woman to win the popular vote for President of the United States. And she did it by 3 million votes. I want to thank everyone who has supported us all these years, and for the wonderful Legacy Fund. I can't wait to see the amazing work that I know it will inspire. And thank you to my colleagues and my compatriots, many in the room tonight, who have become my dearest friends. We've shared a common purpose, and we've forged unbreakable bonds. Leading this organization has been a great honor. I am forever grateful that I was lucky enough to have the chance. Thank you.
I decided I wanted to become a lawyer when I was 12 years old. It was the year after the Supreme Court's decision in Brown v. Board of Education, and I believed the law could be a powerful agent of social change. I wrote a school essay describing my career choice, and I was thrilled when my teacher asked me to read my essay aloud, until I realized that she wasn't impressed, but rather surprised a girl would have such aspirations. That was the day I became a feminist. So how great it was to join Marcia at the Center for Law and Social Policy to work on women's rights and to establish with her and others the National Women's Law Center. From the beginning, we addressed a broad range of issues that affect women and their families, especially those who have low income or who face racial or other forms of discrimination. We stopped states from requiring women to be sterilized to receive public assistance. We improved Social Security for women and expanded tax benefits for single heads of households and families with childcare expenses. We opened all military positions to women. And much, much more. We didn't do any of this alone. We were always part of something larger, a movement with many heroes on the front lines. Our partnerships with individuals and organizations have been critical to our success and to our strength. Today, the Center is part of a vibrant movement with unprecedented breadth and reach. As Elizabeth Warren so aptly described, this year's Women's March was the single largest day of protest in American history. Together, we march to end sexism, racism, poverty, and discrimination on the basis of religion, immigrant status, disability, sexual orientation, and gender identity, to name just a few. The center is ready for the challenges of this broad agenda. We see it in Fatima's strong and bold leadership, the many talents of the center's tremendous staff, and the robust enthusiasm of the center's board and millions of allies, including all of you in this room. We see it in the passion and success of the center's defense of the Affordable Care Act. We see it in the center's work to increase, not cut, federal and state funding for programs critical to women and their families. We see it in the center's work with an unprecedented number of volunteers using their skills and their talents to uphold the rule of law, not the law of rulers. So even in this time of struggle, I am heartened. Yes, we have many challenges, but we can meet them and we can beat them. We are fighting back and we are pushing forward, blazing new trails along the way. I'm tremendously proud of the center's 45 years of accomplishments. But I know they are just the opening salvo of what is yet to come. And I'm so honored by and thrilled about the Legacy Fund and all that the future will bring. I thank the center's incredible staff and board for this wonderful evening and for all of our work together. I've relied so much on your expertise, and I cherish the friendships we've made. I thank the countless individuals and groups I'm so proud to call my colleagues, many of whom are here tonight. It's been an honor to stand shoulder to shoulder with you in the fight for justice. I thank my brilliant husband, Michael Trister, for his love and support, and for the many pro bono hours of work he has given the center, and I think many of you in this room, and our cause. I thank our children, Karen and Noah, our son-in-law, Pete, and our unbelievable grandchildren, Jeremy and Mara, for all the joy they've brought to our lives. It's wonderful to have you all here with me and us tonight. I thank you, Marcia, my friend, my sister. Your extraordinary dedication, warmth, and love have made each day its own reward. And you have made our journey together so much more than my 12-year-old self could ever have imagined. My husband calls Marcia my true partner. What's true is that ours is a partnership for the ages, built on the pursuit of timeless goals: opportunity, equality, and justice. To borrow and update the words of my favorite suffragist, Inez Milholland, liberty must be fought for, and women of the nation and men, this is the time to fight. Thank you.
Thank you, Marcia and Duffy. And I will see you all next year.